Hello and welcome to another episode of Securities Lending Live with Pierpoint. If you are interested in securities lending, repo, and collateral management, then this is the place to be every Wednesday at 10 a.m. BST. I'm Roy Zimmerhansl, and I'm the host. I'm joined by a couple of people today who will introduce themselves momentarily. The countdown took a little bit of time to go, so it hasn't. So we're going to give people a minute or two to start. And the best way to start off the day is to ask that fundamental question: Who let the dogs out? Um, so we'll get started now. This episode today, we're going to focus on two different things, but everything in life is related. In the first half, what we're going to look at is something that's really very topical, and we've been getting a lot of feedback from customers and would-be customers, and that is training and education. People are trying to face up to the new world as people get back to the offices, as we get back to a normal life. But of course, nothing will ever be quite the same as it was. And I think people are taking a different attitude and approach. The second half, we're going to go into risk and really explore that. And I want to dig into a blog post that was put up by one of the people that we collaborate with, and he's with us here today. So the objective of these events is to discuss relevant topics, but more than that, it's to actually engage with people in the audience. We want to talk to you. We're live on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook. So if you want to actually make a comment, ask a question, share an observation, put it in the chat. It will pop up here. We'll actually be able to see it. And hopefully we'll get people to be able to answer the questions. The questions don't have to be about the topics today, but they can be. If they're not about today and they don't really fit in and we don't have time, then we will still make the effort and go in and answer your questions in the comments afterwards. So if you have questions, please put them in, irrespective of what kind they are. And before we get started and I ask our guests to introduce themselves, I want to know, where are you watching from? We tend to get quite a global audience in this one, and hopefully this week will be the same as other weeks. So without any further ado, I will ask our two guests to introduce themselves. So first, if I can go to Zafirah.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thanks so much, Roy. My name is Zafirah, and I am part of the Pierpoint team, and I am head of the training and education department. So my expertise lies in resources, learning and development specifically, and performance related activities for organizations.
Right. Thanks, Zafirah. And now over to you, Julian.
Thanks, Roy. Morning, everybody. My name's Julian, and I'm working alongside Pierpoint and the Pierpoint team, supporting thought leadership, some innovation agenda, digital transformation and change, as well as different approaches to business development and engaging with the clients, moving their programs and projects forwards in a number of different areas. So I look forward to contributing a little bit later. Thank you.
Right. Thanks very much, Julian. And a special hello to our first commentator, always our most distant viewer, Alina, calling in from New Zealand. You're always first and you're always furthest away. So really appreciate you taking the time out this week and other weeks, and appreciate all the exchanges that we've had this week. Some interesting stuff there. Again, I'd say if I could be a student, I'd come to your lectures. Right. So, as I said, this is a live event, but if you're watching in the replay, we still think that it would be useful for you to put questions in, because all of this will be available for time immemorial on LinkedIn. And so we'll make certain those questions get answered. Now, practically, I'm the producer as well as your genial host. And so if you see my eyes darting off, it's not because I'm not paying attention to you. I love every one of our viewers, but it's because I'm trying to keep a few things going at the same time. there is a delay between you typing something into the comments and us being able to see it on screen. So it won't be immediate, and not a lot we can do about that. That's technology. So Zafirah, let's go first to the training and education
Yes.
agenda. So the fundamental question is, why would anyone spend any time or money with training?
Okay, so that's a good question. So I would first, in one simple word, talk about it in terms of growth. So quite simply, you don't want to get left behind. Training is currently about a $5 trillion industry and business, and it's set to grow and reach around $7+ trillion by 2025. And that shows that businesses, large and small, are investing in training for their people. Now, we can't talk about training, so why training? Well, let's break it down slightly. So we talk about something called a knowledge economy. What is the knowledge economy? Well, the definition, quite simply, is one that is based on intellectual capital. This means knowledge and information are the drivers of productivity. So examples of this, for example, is in the field of technology development and investment in new technologies and research creating those technologies, and heavily based in the service industry as well, such as education, communication, and data and information. So workers in this economy are highly skilled and specialized in their fields, meaning they are meeting global market requirements and needs. So this essentially means that a big part of developing knowledge and becoming specialized in an area is learning and development training. So we call people in this area knowledge workers, and they are becoming increasingly attractive to employers. So this is forcing, so this attractiveness, this requirement of the market is forcing people to pursue additional education to make themselves more attractive, and likewise be more attractive to employers, and vice versa. So there's been a huge amount of research and data that shows knowledge workers are constantly striving after initial education, whether even, post degree, for example, to continue developing their careers and their skill set. And this is really to remain competitive. There's a huge rise in adult learning across the board, even in things like, robotics, AI, and people. And currently, actually, to bring a little bit more current, there is this talk of people having to reskill post pandemic, or whatever, the term is, new normal. So to reskill, to be able to get back out there in these difficult times, back in the economy. So, learning and development is so important at the moment.
Right. Look, the thing I'm most impressed with is not just your long history in this business, but that you were able to do that with only taking one breath during that sort of hit. So well done on that. Now, look, you've been doing this. Yes, well, we've been working together for about a dozen years, and you were involved with training and education before that. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh gosh, this is a difficult question. So I think we all struggle with talking about ourselves. Yes, I'm super passionate about learning and development. I've been working in the field for in excess of 10 years now, and I belong to my industry body, or one of them, which is the Chartered Institute of Professional Development, the CIPD, which really gives a professional like myself the ability to marry, I guess, theory and best practices with real life skills, and working with clients on training. So I guess that this is my passion. This is what I do. The reason why I love this job so much is you can make a real impact in people's lives. You see them flourish, you see them grow. You're part of a team where you're helping your colleagues or your clients to get the best out of their people. And I think that there's that satisfaction in seeing a job well done when we've rolled out a piece of training or learning opportunity that has gone excellent, that's gone super great, and you're able to get great feedback from that, and you're doing something right. And also, likewise, if there have been challenges and questions with regards to training, I'm always learning as well and always striving to improve.
Yeah, look, that one of the interesting things over the time that we've worked together. So it was sort of 2009, 2010, and that was obviously in the aftermath of the global financial crisis. And one of the interesting things that we saw was that many banks were actually insourcing a lot of their training activity, but it
Yeah.
was not focused really on skills. It was really in order to satisfy mostly regulatory compliance, right? Because
Right.
post PFC, there were all kinds of step ups in terms of what firms had to do to meet their regulatory standards, and so they were insourcing those, and all the training budgets went back to sort of those sorts of issues. Um, but I'd say over the last year, we've seen kind of a change, haven't we? I wonder if you can
Absolutely.
take us through your thoughts on that.
Yes, I mean the change really is in post financial markets crash. You're right. There was a real dip in budget spend on training, where organisation looked inwards and spent their budgets on compliance, regulatory, and making sure they were meeting those regulatory requirements. So luckily we've seen a real change since about 2015, 2016, where budgets have increased year on year by 10%, 12%, with a slight dip with the pandemic, but more on that later. And it's excellent to see that organizations, large and small, are really grasping this idea that they need to tap into their human resource potential. That could be their golden ticket, maybe untapped resource that they are now looking to match learning organizations who are at the top of their game and mimic that level of success, which is sometimes in high performing organizations. They do really invest in their staff, and from talent management to clear succession and progression pathways to just offering fantastic training opportunities. So massive growth.
Great, thanks for that. And one of the things I want to do is bring in Julian onto this, because I think in the past there has been sort of the regulatory process. I wouldn't want to call it a tick box exercise to training, but probably not far off of that. And so now it's much more about sort of practically saying, how do we actually skill up to make our business better? And Julian, I want to turn to you, because one of the interesting things that you've brought in our collaboration is kind of a different approach to helping clients become more successful. I wonder if you can take us through that.
Sure. So Roy, thanks. Zafirah mentioned clearly the value that training is able to contribute to increasing staff knowledge and skill sets. And there's a critical requirement for the business to identify the value from training. So there's a requirement to assess the contribution it makes, to also look at how they're engaging with their clients using training as a platform. So training can be a process whereby in-house staff are clearly increasing their knowledge base, but also in the vendor world, for example, a technology or software vendor implicitly has a training process within their delivery and technology implementation programs. And quite often what we see and have seen for some of the smaller emerging fintechs, they have absolutely limited capacity to bring in bespoke, dedicated training resources into their organization. And they have been talking to us about leveraging an external training specialist like the Pierpoint organization to deliver product training to the customer base to increase capacity, increase quality, and to drive then further success for their customer relationships. This has been one example. Another example that we've seen is, again, in a technology world, a vendor was interested in bringing their training message earlier in the client engagement journey. So what do I mean here? Traditionally, as I mentioned, training has been used to educate users on a platform once it's been implemented. But actually what they were looking at is how do they leverage a training service, again, delivered digitally, with a hybrid package of both digital education targeting C-suite users, people who own the budget, who understand that there's new emerging technologies that the C-suite perhaps doesn't have time or appetite to read through a lot of independent collateral. And subscribing to a training store or training service that is providing education around an emerging technology, different principles and emerging innovation concepts, that has been viewed as being an effective way to start to engage with the customer base earlier. That then leads through into, again, tailored training to program and project managers or business owners, as well as the end users of any platform or solution set that needs to take place. So in summary, what we're seeing is an innovative use of training through different techniques to engage with the customer, to build a relationship and create value.
Great. Thanks for that. Zafirah, I don't know if you have anything to add to Julian's comments.
Yeah, just to add that, I think to pick up on a key word there, which Julian mentioned, is quality. We find in our business that, in securities finance, budget holders may sit in different departments. They could be in HR, they could be group, or a particular team holding, the leader of that team holding a budget. And so I think the quality we bring is knowing that if they want learning and development and to upskill their staff, we have, as professionals in learning and development, we are able to provide quality training options and advice that is, and this is a big word, is like really measurable. So how do we factor in return on investment? So everyone talks about training, great, but you really set yourself apart by making sure that when you are working with clients, you are showing the benefits, return on investment, and making all training measurable and accountable to the budgets that people are spending.
Right. Thanks for that. And so I think that's what it is. So people realize that there are gaps, but it has to actually have a return on investment. And so that's the thing that I see that's very different, where in the past it was like, we need to do training because we need to make certain our skill sets are kept up to speed. But now it's saying, well, that's not enough. It has to actually be measurable, as you say.
Absolutely.
You mentioned about the pandemic, that things kind of changed last year. Can you share your thoughts on that?
Yes, so I keep up to date on developments in the business, in the industry of L&D. So it was quite interesting in some of my reading, and I'll happily share some links to the reports after today. So I mentioned before that by 2025, potentially the training business will be at 7 trillion, and however, what we saw throughout the pandemic is there was a little blip of purchase of training. So reports that I've seen, for example, clearly show that budgets have been reduced. So, for example, the increases gained from 2029, which was about 12%, has fallen at about the same figure in 2020 to date. However, on closer examination, of reports on the training market, it shows that while budgets have been reduced in certain areas, the appetite for learning is still there and perhaps has even grown. And the way that has been harnessed, if you like, is it's been organizations really being very specific and targeting the types of training they're purchasing. And I would suggest that, overall, because of lockdowns on a global scale, e-learning is obviously cheaper to purchase than face-to-face training. And how that has, what that looks like is, for example, large companies have increased their training spend and the number of hours they've offered training. So something like from 38.8 hours to over 100 hours of training. And they've been successfully doing that by decreasing the cost per person. So again, that ties in with what I'm saying about, focusing on e-learning. Smaller companies, for example, have decreased training hours. However, they have increased the cost per person. So again, it just shows how people are purchasing e-learning solutions, digital learning opportunities more. And then you have medium-sized companies who have increased their training from, for example, 33.9 in 2019 to 34.7 hours in 2020, while also decreasing their per person costs. And like I said, they've done this by looking at social learning opportunities online, online resources, digital opportunities, webinars, and online e-learning courses. All great methods for teaching and learning. We had to adapt in the pandemic, so there's absolutely nothing wrong there. However, with a certain optimism now, hopefully, spend will increase or even stay the same, but I think everyone will be more geared up to make sure they're continuously developing their staff.
Right. Well, thanks. Well, we obviously hope that training budgets actually increase. But look, I think there's lots of training providers out there, and I think the objective now is to be much more targeted in what you're trying to achieve and get specific skill sets. I'm interested if anyone in the audience wants to share what's been happening at their own firms in terms of the experience of training. Is it more important, less important? Is it kind of staying the same? What are your thoughts or what are your actual experiences from your firms? One of the other things that I think is really interesting is in the pandemic, of course, quite a lot of people had spare time and they did training, but into their own personal things that they enjoy. So not necessarily always work skills, but also personal things. And any thoughts there?
Well, I think we've all heard about the explosion of people, for example, taking a grasp on their physical fitness and learning how to exercise better at home, versus me, who became more of a proficient. Well, I was always good at baking, but left it for many, many years. And I got back into baking, and I'm sure I've made the rest of the team drool quite a bit with all my pictures of baking goods that I've produced. I think what everyone's favorite recipe is the banana cake one, right? So I have a great recipe for that. And in the spare time, in lockdown, obviously spare time and to do with work, but I really enjoy is I like creating things. So I started to look at learning on how to do more animation and animated videos, GIFs, and to incorporate that in training. So, gosh, I think people have really unwittingly have managed to pick up a lot more new skills throughout the pandemic. What about yourself, Roy? I know you've definitely been doing a lot more.
I'm always doing something. I think right now I'm involved in two things. One is about membership clubs. So I'm trying to learn how to do the membership clubs better, because we have our own membership club for securities finance professionals, and there'll be more coming on that. That's the Pierpoint Alpha community. But look, it's new to me, so I don't really know how to do that. So that's on the work side. So hopefully that's getting better. What I do know how to do is get experts in front of people to talk about important and timely issues. That bit's going pretty well, but I'm trying to learn other things on it. But personally, I've spent a lot of time learning about video editing and sound editing. So obviously, I still have more to learn, as you can tell from the green halo that constantly is appearing over my head. Lighting, I guess, is the next one I'll be learning about. But it's been fun, because I haven't really done those sorts of things before, so it's been a bit of a learning exercise there. Julian, what about you? Anything that you've invested in personally?
Oh, Roy, the list is long and extensive. What I wanted to echo was that the importance of gaining specialist knowledge. And, we've been, during the lockdown period, brushing up our skills in different business areas as well as the personal areas has been really key. I think we've seen stories about people learning more about adjacent activities, additional product domains, certainly in the financial world, as well as being more aware of the health angle that Zafirah mentioned. Personally, I've been looking at different painting and decorating skills that I've had to learn, as well as fixing and maintaining a couple of rather old vehicles. So the training and personal development angle continues afoot, it has to be said.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, look, and I think that's interesting. And you've seen, the interesting thing about all these video calls is you find how many people have like personal interests. I think, as much as it's been horrific constantly just being on virtual events, and it's not been fair that Zafirah has been teasing us with all of her great baking pictures. And everyone that knows me knows I have a massive sweet tooth. So it's been really, I've thought about putting Zafirah's messages on auto delete, but I've not. But it's been interesting seeing the personal side of it. I was on a call yesterday where someone had a series of guitars up on their walls, and that's their real passion, and they've been able to up their own interest and sort of expand their skill set in the sort of the downtime or lockdown time. So it's been interesting. Zafirah, I don't know if you have any sort of closing thoughts, maybe on maybe individuals in learning and organizations in learning, where they overlap and where they're different.
Yes. So as an individual, I think to finish off, I would say as an individual, people now will have to continue to be competitive by upskilling themselves in small bite-sized chunks and what we call blended solutions. And I would hazard a guess that organizations will continue to make sure that learning is accessible and potentially delivered in the flow of work. So I really see this as a future. AI is already here. However, it's not been 100% harnessed by most organizations at the minute, and I can see that developing. So almost like something in the flow of work. So somebody may be at a computer screen, but they'll have a little chat bot, which we have already, but more specialized to their needs. And if they're struggling with something, then that helps them there. So, and in the future, that we already use virtual learning environments, VLEs for short, and I can only see that growing as well. Certainly, I know in sort of areas where it's mechanical and medical, virtual reality is already used, and I would say that would move over into mainstream, and I'd be super excited to see how that could work. And yeah, I mean, individuals will continue to learn, will subscribe to social learning opportunities, which is what we're promoting heavily with the membership club, because that brings a social aspect of marrying your career aspirations with learning and knowledge delivery. And on a larger scale, businesses will have to adapt, and to make sure they retain talent and develop talent, they will have to give raise their profile by showing they have great learning opportunities to make staff want to stay with them, and look after their team that way. So engage their team, show they care about their staff development, which then has a great impact on performance and productivity as well.
So do you think sorry, that was going to be the last question, but I'm just curious, do you think companies are more focused on their staff as people now than they have been historically, rather than just assets that get the job done?
I think that the landscape is changing more. There are more open conversations about making sure there is working from home. For example, people talk about work-life balance, but now that we have all had to work from home, and as you said, the human element has come through a lot more. I think organizations are listening more to their staff, so, and being aware to provide a really nice working environment, in the sense of, when I say nice, I mean opportunities to understand any stress, anxiety, and worries that people have experienced throughout this pandemic, which we all have, and really try to understand their staff with providing a sort of a safer environment, if you like, to voice those concerns. So yes, organizations are bringing more and more of the human element to their teams, which I think is excellent.
Great. So thanks very much. And that, everyone, was the half from Zaf.
Oh, gosh.
I've been waiting to say that all show. I came up with that yesterday, and I should have started with that. So that's the first half of the show. So thanks very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay. So now I want to turn into the second part of the show here, which is focus on risk. So fundamentally, securities finance is really a risk business, right? At the end of the day, it's about who you're dealing with. What is the collateral? What are the transactions? What are the natures of it? What's the nature of it? How do you control it, monitor it, and assess it? So risk is really fundamental in my perspective. But Julian, you recently posted something as Air & Co. that's kind of outside of the securities finance area specifically. But maybe you can take us through your blog post, what the thinking was behind it, and sort of where you were going with that idea.
Yeah, Roy, thanks a lot. In fact, I'd like to start actually with a session that we hosted on the Pierpoint live session previously, which talked about common domain model. And one of the important angles that we need to consider is what other aspects of the financial markets business would a common domain model approach impact very positively. And this is risk. Arguably, the origins of the principles of a common domain model date back to the SecDB platform from Goldman Sachs, latterly then Athena and the other global banking risk and data platforms. What do they do? What they do is to codify data and business process together. And how does that matter? It means that any data item has instructions of what to do with that data item naturally embedded alongside it. It means that you don't need to then have very specialist systems consuming a data item where the business logic resides in that system. So what does that mean? What we've seen more recently is that there's been a lot of focus on regulatory obligations, transaction reporting across the industry. And there's an argument that there's been an underspend in some of the risk areas. And risk in its own right is clearly a critically important gatekeeper to controls and governance within any organization. Specifically in the banks, certain limits and controls and governance are set. And the risk models and the quants that are writing these models need to be fully aware of all of the complexities and the use cases that they need to cover off. What we've seen over the past 20 years is that the modeling techniques for a lot of these quantitative models hasn't really developed hugely. Some of the technology on which the models exist has moved from grid towards cloud compute and compute on demand. But in principle, the models are consuming data attributes and data items and then have to include complex processing to use the data to reach an outcome, a calculated result. This means that what we're seeing is an opportunity to review and revise some of the different techniques and modern mathematical principles that are now emerging that help solve for some of these complex modeling requirements. Before the recent news around Greensill and the Archegos explosions, the industry sits there managing a whole suite of valuation models, risk models, capital adequacy models, counterparty exposure models. And what tends to happen is that they are duplicated by business product or business silo. There isn't really a principle of a horizontal solution. The technology is commonly duplicated, and the outcome is that there's imperfect results and there is a high cost carried in-house within the organization. So there's a number of different factors taking place, driven by different data and process functions, emerging technologies, and mathematical compute capabilities. So it's a complex, wide-ranging landscape, and it's been a little while since I was a practitioner, but it's definitely an area that we're seeing banks picking up their interest in for 21 and into 22.
So I recognize quite a lot of that background from my own experience. Look, and because often what you have is different business lines grow up at different times and at different scales. And so the support tends to be very siloed because it's like we have a new business activity. We need to measure the risk for it. This is how we're going to do that. And you end up with this sort of accumulation of different systems at different times with different capabilities and all of that. So that obviously presents a challenge, but you can understand from a business point of view how you end up where you are. But where, how do you deal with that issue? Because that's not going to change. Companies are going to introduce something new this year, and they're going to have a risk model attached to that, which may be different from the others that they have.
So I think that's very true. What's clear is that a lot of the data and information architectures within the banks is really not all that up to date. It's a bit like living in a house that needs rewiring, grade 1 listed house, and it's very difficult to strip out the infrastructure in your house whilst you're living in it in order to put in some new Cat5 cabling. In the risk world, I think that there are challenges to look at the way the data is shared on a standardized basis within the bank. That is a flow of data and information from pre-trade through the front office, picking up the key trade attributes, and then capturing and model those attributes into the risk engines is the core business. So a standardized internal representation of cash movements and risk items and elements within the data structure is critical. Secondly, FRTB requires the banks to be able to stress.
Stop. FRTB needs to be explained to people, please.
So FRTB is the Fundamental Review of the Trading Book. So this is a post-Lehman regulation that was proposed to enforce a more detailed capability to analyze the risk within the bank. Now, it's a far more wide-reaching regulatory requirement than that. But one of the attributes and one of the characteristics that it obliges is the banks need to be able to report and stress multiple different risk factors within their product base. So this could be counterparty exposure, it could be tenor, it could be interest rate risk, all sorts of different risk variables. But where you've got different products, commodities, fixed income, currencies, equities, as well as structured products and derivatives, there isn't a standardized representation of these risk factors. So the banks are then facing incredibly complex challenges to demonstrate to the regulator that they can stress all of the risk factors in the portfolio when they're very unlikely to be able to compare like with like. So it's really this philosophy that was originated in SecDB and Athena and the other data and process-driven platforms that enabled some of the banks, such as Goldman's and JP Morgan and Bank of America, to be able to deconstruct their, at a trade level, any of the different risk attributes in the portfolio. So this is an obligation that they face, and there is a complex challenge to put in place the technology that enables that. And looking at principles such as common domain model absolutely sit as a use case to help solve for this.
And just to be clear on that, Julian, so the reason why common domain model will actually make a positive contribution for this is what?
So that there is the principle of standardized data and process by product and by use case within the bank, so that if I am starting to model a transaction that's a structured product or a derivative product, I can deconstruct that using the common domain model elements. So I can now compare different trade types and transaction types and risk elements with another.
Look, and that's really critical, and that's the issue that we've been trying to actually deliver to people, is that common domain model obviously is just an acronym, right? It's really about what's the practical application of it and what does it actually do to make a difference for the business. So you're saying that by having this sort of the common domain model with consistent sort of approaches to the different life cycle activities, it becomes easier to aggregate and disaggregate sort of risk positions. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Or?
Roy, that's very nicely put. Obviously, the context that we've been discussing, CDM within the securities finance, derivatives, and repo world, has been to look at standardization of data transfer within a bank and externally in order to reduce cost. Using the similar principles of common domain model, that would absolutely bring a business benefit in the risk world. And the other important angle on this to consider is that anybody looking at driving a budget for a CDM project needs to look at all of the impacted areas in the bank which would benefit or accrue a direct business benefit from the adoption of a common domain model. Clearly, implementing that at scale across the bank is going to be an incredibly complex and highly challenging initiative. But picking certain use cases, both for risk and the risk areas, as well as the risk domains, as well as the product domains across derivatives and securities finance, for example, aggregate to a cumulative benefit to drive the business case.
And that's really what the point is, right? So individually, each of these applications looks expensive, but we consider that you actually need to do this not just for regulatory purposes, but for your own risk management. That ends up feeding into the regulatory oversight. It actually becomes not an optional thing. It's a mandatory spend, really.
Agreed. That's absolutely correct. And when we look at the wider scope of use cases for CDM, regulatory reporting clearly features on that agenda. And there are some initiatives in flight to look at digital regulatory reporting using common standardized elements. So if you look in the trade lifecycle, from the front office, trade modeling, through confirmations and allocations, there's a use case for common domain model, through risk, both from the risk modeling point of view and FRTB, through regulatory reporting requirements to lower the cost and standardize and improve the quality of regulatory reporting. On an end-to-end basis, there are multiple touch points for CDM in principle that enable a business case.
And I guess is one of the issues there. I mean, that sounds to me like everybody needs to be looking at this across multiple activities. There's lots of work to do. Are there enough people to actually do it?
So what we've seen is that quite often there's been a disconnect between business and technology. If you look at other technologies such as distributed ledgers and blockchain, what's happened is that there's been a focus in the IT department on looking at these emerging technologies, and getting crossover into the business is critical. With common domain model, having the business engagement who are driving and steering the evolution of these technologies and innovations is absolutely key. If we loop into the first half of a game of two halves, Zafirah's commentary around training is critical. We have already discussed a CDM training initiative with a couple of participants in the industry, where increasing the number of people that understand the principles and use cases of CDM is key. Educating, training, and transferring knowledge to business owners, as well as the people executing the project, is critical, as well as the coders who are writing baseline code in the technology supporting common domain model, whether that's open source or not, means that in order for any of these initiatives to build scale, including in risk, training and crossover is critical. What we found in the risk world is that there's quite a reluctance for key quantitative leaders, industry leaders, to start to review some of these emerging technologies, because it's fundamentally challenging their domain and their intellectual property. So we created the idea of legacy IP as opposed to legacy IT, and it's critical that the industry starts to look at some of these emerging techniques that are going to revolutionize the way that, at its heart, mathematical or financial calculations are made, as well as the risk calculations, that are going to provide a platform for the next 20 years, if we're prepared to start to consider that some of the legacy risk models are perhaps no longer fit for purpose.
And do you think that people will have an option to not invest in redoing their programs?
So I think that that's always an option, Roy. I think that there are people who are looking to reduce the total amount of spend that they have, and refactoring or just extending the life of an investment, significant investments that they've made, is clearly often an agenda. But in reality, understanding how the business benefits of these new techniques are going to contribute to the bottom line is important, and therefore making an investment, even just if it's an initial understanding or a reduced use case set, is going to be a good starting point.
Great. Okay, so listen, thanks for that. I'm curious now whether any of you just sort of, maybe Julian, actually, let's just start with, so your advice is sort of changing environment. I guess the problem is that people don't always know what to do or where to go or what the next step is. So what do you think the logical thing to do is? Sort of a chat with you, just sort of expand on your thinking there.
Yeah, so Roy, absolutely. I think that opening a dialogue with forward-looking resources, people who have a wider knowledge base, starting to look at how digital transformation is going to shape the industry, not on a one-year horizon probably, or even two, but the younger generation coming through, leveraging new data techniques, new quantitative modeling techniques, are going to need the toolkits to deliver complicated and continuously complex challenges for the business going forward. Starting a conversation with an organization that can help analyze and provide advisory services around how to eat the elephant one piece at a time, and to deconstruct and identify the business case and the challenges that they face.
Right. So I guess what's the best way for people to get in touch with you, just to have that kind of an initial conversation with you?
So an approach by LinkedIn would be quite fine, just to open a conversation and then see if we can do a call around what your goals and visions and objectives are, and then how increasingly these digital techniques and solutions can help solve some of the critical problems.
Great. Thanks for that. Zafirah, the same kind of thing. We spent a lot of time talking about training. What's your advice to people that understand what you're saying, but don't really know how to get from where they are today to where they would like to be?
Sure. I love to interact with the individual learner, as well as somebody potentially looking at learning opportunities for their staff. And you can find me on LinkedIn, which is ZafJ, or if you go to the Pierpoint website, you can get in touch with us on our contacts form. And by all means, learners who are interested in securities finance training, please get in touch with us and talk about your career aspirations and how we can help you. A great way of that, for example, is joining the membership club we have, which provides bite-sized learning for people in the business. So it's regular and it keeps you up to date. You're able to speak with peers and network and get the learning you need in a regular basis. So fantastic opportunity there. In terms of business leaders, I would say, or business heads considering training for their staff, look, speak to me about your training. What is the end goal here? And we're happy to work with you to provide a training solution that actually becomes measurable and effective, and with a clear evaluation strategy in place, which again sets us apart from anybody just providing training. So we will hit the nail on the head with what your goals and objectives are.
Great. Thanks very much for that. So I just want to wrap up with a couple of things. So thanks for that, Zafirah and Julian. I think that's always quite enlightening to listen to you guys talk. There's a couple of things here. So number one, we do a lot of free securities finance content. So I think we're at over 50 blogs now. This is, I think, live stream number 12, maybe. I'm not, I don't have enough fingers, so I think it's about 12. We do, of course, the podcasts, and we've got a new podcast series. We expect the first one to come out not this week, but next Thursday. So watch for that. We've got a new series. This one is all really focused on technology. So all of our guests in this series will actually be technology oriented. So some of it is directly applicable, some of it is influential on the business, and some of it we see as having opportunity for application in future in the business. So watch for that a week from Thursday. But look, we spend a lot of time and a reasonable amount of money on free content, and we want to keep doing that. One of the things that we've had many people suggest to us is that we have transcripts for the videos, and we'd love to do that. But look, the reality is, if you like our free content, we'd love you to buy us a coffee. So what do I actually mean by that? Look, the idea is that we want to keep providing the free content, and we could support that funding with sponsorship. And again, we've had people approach us about sponsoring the shows or sponsoring the podcasts and things. And while we really appreciate that, and we may yet do that, the reality is we would really prefer to keep everything ad free. And so we kind of have this challenge of ad free, but sort of growing our content. So what we came up with was this idea of buying us a coffee. Fortunately, there is a platform called Buy Me a Coffee. And I'm just going to share my screen with you so you can see the Pierpoint page. It is. Hopefully you can see that now. And let me just see if that works. No, that doesn't change it. But anyway, this is our page. A little bit of a corporate video saying what we do. So that's a couple of minutes. Here's Zafirah wearing her name tag. That's actually me drinking a real coffee while podcasting. So that's not fake. That's real. We do drink coffee. And this is John on one of our live streams. So the idea is we're trying to raise money right now to get transcripts. So you see that on the goal. You can see that on the more about all of this on the Buy Me a Coffee session. We get lots of great feedback and commentary on the free stuff that we do. And so there's also the opportunity here for you to be a bronze, silver, or a gold member. And there's different things that come with that, different benefits from membership. All of the money that we get for this is going to be going into making the free content bigger and more expansive, and making it better for you. So if you value it, please consider giving us a coffee or two, or three, or much. I can drink an endless amount of coffee. One of the things that we're doing is we do our live streams on Saturday. That's now turned into Fundamentals. And look, we've got lots of subscribers. I know several people that are regular viewers have actually said that they're going to get their trainees and graduates to watch that. That's great. That's exactly what it's for. It's for people that need to learn more about securities lending. And so we've got this fundamental series. It's only on YouTube, because the problem with LinkedIn and Facebook that we love, it's hard to find things. Whereas on YouTube, it's easier to record and store things. So we've got a fundamentals a playlist. So all of the programs will be in that. So that's on Saturdays at 1 p.m. BST. So we look forward to that. And that's just another example of how we're trying to actually spread the word about securities lending globally, make it more accessible to people. And if you could buy us a coffee, I'd appreciate that. So that's probably enough of that. Look, that's it. I think maybe if I can just go to everyone for sort of closing words, maybe Zafirah, if you have anything to close out with.
Sure, that's actually timely, because I wanted to say, so during my conversation today, I have mentioned some key facts and figures. And as Roy says, buy me a coffee. I'm about to share those curated content links and report with you if you're interested in finding a little bit more about the training industry and having a conversation supported by facts and figures and reports in your conversations with other people about training. So again, hard at work curating that content for you. So I'll share those links with you. Roy, what's the best way to do that? Should I drop them in the chat box now, or do we do that in a little bit later on?
No, what we'll do is we'll put it into the different streams. But again, if people are watching this on replay, it'll be in the show notes on YouTube. That again, anything that you're looking for on replay, probably easiest to find on YouTube. So so we'll drop it in there. But I think that's a good example where, look, I know as a business manager in the past where I've kind of said, look, I need to get training for my people, and look, I've done this business, right? So, and I still didn't really always know where to go or what to do. So appreciate the help that you give people to guide them through that process. So thanks, Zafirah. Julian, any last words from you?
No, nothing more to add, Roy. Just to say thank you for the opportunity to contribute, and we'd be very interested in a follow-up conversation with the audience.
Great. Thanks, everyone. And thanks very much to our viewers. Thanks, Zafirah and Julian. Much appreciated. One of the guests that we haven't quite 100% confirmed yet, but I think will be on with us next week, will be one of the guests we tried to have last week, which was a great show with Boaz from ShareGain and Gareth from Connection Markets. We were trying to get Guido Strömer on from HQLAX. There were technical problems. He wasn't able to do that. We fixed those problems. And so we've invited him back. So if he's not back next week, it'll be at some future date, but hopefully we can get him for next week. That's it for me. Thanks very much for your time. And I look forward to seeing you next week.
Bye.